I've been talking about gold since it was $2,000 or $3,000, and I've kept talking about it until now. The real time I said gold would rise was during my first phase of entrepreneurship. You idiots don't think I'm just an internet celebrity. I really am an internet celebrity, but before that, I was the boss of China's first capital company. Back then, I was involved in getting Chinese gold listed. As for China Gold, the very first privately listed company was founded by me. You guys, do you even know who I am? That was in 2010. Back then, in 2010, but as early as 2005, I was already saying that gold would quadruple or triple in value. In the December 2005 issue of Shanghai Oriental Outlook, I published an article, you guys, do you even know who I am? I said it back in 2005. Compared to me, you idiots, what I said 20 years ago is still relevant in this world. In terms of eloquence in Chinese and actually having been a boss, building something up and becoming a big boss, I'm the only one. There are plenty of big bosses, but either they're not as articulate as I am, or they don't come out and do YouTube. Those who come on YouTube and are more eloquent or more knowledgeable than me, or better writers than me, have never actually been a boss. They haven't seen the world, never organized anything, never experienced the so-called business battlefield, never been through real challenges, so they just can't get to the point. Was that a good rant? Was it or not? The words might be rough, but the reasoning isn't. Let me tell you all something. The war over silver, let me tell you, this is a true story. The COMEX Silver War. This was a real event in the history of the New York Mercantile Exchange, the last Silver War. The main characters in the story I'm telling you today are the Hunt brothers. You can look up more about the Hunt brothers on Google. This family was originally from Illinois and became prosperous in Texas, and this all happened in the last century. In the mid-1900s, their family discovered oil fields in Texas. There were many private oil wells there, and they struck it rich almost overnight. So, the elder Hunt, named Lafayette Harrison, took 3 wives, wife number 1, wife number 2, and wife number 3, and had 15 children. All of them were raised quite well. Among them, 2 of the children from the first wife, since the main inheritance went to the first wife's children. The sons from the first wife were the Hunt brothers. They were the sons of the first wife. One was named Bunker, the other Herbert. The Hunt brothers, Bunker and Herbert, led the American silver bull market that began in 1974. It was much more than today. Before they made their move, silver had always been around about 1. Ever since World War II, it stayed around $1. By 1974, the 2 of them started buying slowly, bit by bit, and they ended up buying 55 million ounces. 55 million ounces of silver ended up in the hands of the Hunt brothers. Because they were oil tycoons and had the money, they bought 55 million ounces, which pushed the COMEX silver price from around $150 up to $6 per ounce. In other words, it rose from the $1 to $150 range before 1970 to $6 by 1974. $6 per ounce of silver. Remember these key figures. Then the 2 of them started to get a bit carried away because they had made a huge amount of money. 55 million ounces, 55 million ounces. The 2 of them were worried that the US government would play dirty and confiscate their silver because back in the 1930s and 1940s, the US government had done just that, confiscating everyone's gold. So, at that time, the US government confiscated all the gold owned by Americans. Any private individual holding gold in the US was breaking the law. That was the case before and after the war. So the Hunt brothers were afraid their silver would be confiscated as well. That's why they used their private planes to transport load after load of silver to underground vaults in Zurich, Switzerland, in the Alps, storing it in mountain vaults. They even hired the best gunmen in Texas to escort the shipments. 20 sharpshooters were chosen for the job. The Hunt brothers bought 55 million ounces of silver. The price of silver skyrocketed from $1.50 to $6. By then, the Hunt brothers were the richest in America, with the family topping the nation's wealth list that year. Well, the Hunts felt that saving in US dollars was not reliable. At that time, America's national strength was not as great as it would later become. In 1974, the United States was in turmoil. After the Vietnam War, things were shaky, kind of like today with instability everywhere. So the Hunts made up their minds. They decided to buy up all the silver in the world and push the price to where they believed it should be. All right. With gold fixed at $35 an ounce, he was forced to buy silver instead. Worried the government might also suppress silver, he planned to ship it to Switzerland. That was his process. At that time, rumors were spreading wildly around the world that the Hunt brothers were going to monopolize not only the US silver market, but the global silver market as well. So, what was the annual silver production in 1974? It was 245 million ounces. And what was the global annual demand for silver? The demand was 450 million ounces. Listen to these numbers. Now go ahead and use AI to check what today's global silver demand and production are. Let me tell you, it's exactly the same. Silver production cannot be increased. Don't listen to the bullshit from those idiots. As if silver were iron ore or copper ore, it's very difficult to increase the production of gold and silver. It's extremely hard. There just isn't that much, and most of it is a byproduct. To get silver, you have to dig up a huge amount of copper. So it's either a gold silver byproduct or a silver copper byproduct. Most silver is mined as a byproduct, so that's the situation. The annual production of silver has always lagged behind the annual demand for silver. That's the key issue. So the Hunt brothers targeted silver. Why not gold? Simply put, the Hunt brothers were smarter than me, as they were the wealthiest Americans. The reason the Hunt brothers didn't go after gold was because the US government was playing dirty at the time. They invoked the Bretton Woods system, and it was illegal for any American to buy gold, no matter if you were the richest person or not. So they had to settle for the next best thing. Got it? All right. Then people asked, if these two brothers were to buy recklessly, how much gold is there in the US and in the world available for them to trade? He's already bought 55 million ounces. How much can the US provide? Is he trying to squeeze the market even more? If we give him everything, how much is there and what's the cost? You still have to do the math. It's 200 million ounces. Including all the private reserves in the US, there are only 200 million ounces left. Damn, he's already bought 55 million ounces, and there are still 200 million ounces. All right, then, the situation is already clear now. It's clear who's going to win and who's going to lose. The Hunt brothers can actually come up with that much money if the price is around $6. So the Hunts flew to New York to rally their supporters to gather momentum. Eagerly, over at the COMEX, Hunt himself delivered a major speech. It was very much like seeing Elon Musk today. In his speech, he basically said that almost anything in this world is better than holding a $1 bill. He meant even the US dollar, the little green bills, the green paper, almost anything is more valuable than that, more valuable, because even a fool can use a printing press. What he meant was that silver, gold, anything is better. Even pots and pans are worth more than this because they can just print this stuff recklessly. At that time, the US was indeed running a huge deficit. The deficit was through the roof. And by March 1975, even with all that, it still wasn't enough because the price of silver started rising again. The price started dropping again, just like today, and the banks, well, they had to keep topping up margin calls. They were using leverage too. This was a major reason for his downfall. Then he ran out of money. What do you do when you run out of money? He flew to Tehran to see the Shah of Iran, Pahlavi at the time. Yes, that's the Shah of Iran people talk about today, but back then it was his father, the one who hadn't been overthrown yet. He went to see his father. Lao Wang was right. Gold is a byproduct of mining. It's a byproduct of pyrite and copper mining, isn't it? That's what the fuck I'm talking about. I've actually acquired gold companies before, damn it, so how could I not know? Even if I don't know how to do it myself, I still know about it. I've never actually slaughtered a pig myself, but damn it, you get it? I'm someone who sells pork, you know what I mean? So the general situation with the pigs, those butchers still told me about it. All right, let's continue. Although the two brothers didn't have enough cash on hand, they found the Shah of Iran, Pahlavi, and got him to join forces by telling him stories. As long as we join forces to buy silver with the amount he has, how could we not trigger a short squeeze? This would force them to the brink. And what's more, silver wouldn't just be $6 anymore. We could push it up to $60 if we wanted. See, wouldn't Iran have even more money then? Wouldn't this be a great opportunity for us? But Pahlavi didn't quite get it, so he had his finance minister discuss the details with Bunker. That's normal, of course. The finance minister would handle the specifics. The finance minister, an Iranian nobleman, asked Bunker directly, "How much did you make last year?" Bunker hesitated for a moment and said, "About $50 million." The finance minister immediately refused to cooperate with him. Two key moments. What kind of cultural difference is this? First, he hesitated because there was no trust or familiarity between them. The fact that you hesitated shows a guilty conscience. You said $50 million. The Iranian finance minister thought you were exaggerating. He hesitated for a moment because, as the richest man in 20th century America, saying he made $50 million was impossible. Why the hesitation and that specific amount? He later wrote in his memoirs that he really regretted it. Otherwise, he would have won a long time ago. Why? Later in his memoirs, Bunker wrote, "Why did I hesitate and say $50 million, damn it?" He suddenly thought of the U.S. Internal Revenue Service. It was that simple. He was afraid that if he said too much, Americans would spread the word because it would definitely be reported in the newspapers. And in the U.S., you have to pay taxes on that. Because if you tell the Shah of Iran that you make $2 billion a year, what about the taxes? That's why Bunker hesitated for a moment. He claimed $50 million to avoid IRS back taxes, but the Shah of Iran isn't impressed. You're nothing, like a dead rat in your belt, pretending to be a successful hunter to come to my lavish palace talking about cooperation. Fuck off. Cursed him out and sent him away. It's just like this, and it delayed things for Bunker. But at that time, Iran had a neighboring major country in the Middle East, also rich and oil-rich. That was Saudi Arabia. Even today, Saudi Arabia and Iran are still like they were back then, both powerful and influential. Saudi Arabia also has a king. Iran had a king too, Pahlavi, but Pahlavi was overthrown. However, the king of Saudi Arabia was named Faisal. Faisal was interested. He took the initiative and said, "Well, why don't you come to me? I have money too. Let's work together." The two of them agreed to sign the contract and get started in April 1975. But you see, man proposes, God disposes. On March 25th, 1975. That was just 1 or 2 weeks before the contract was supposed to be signed. This was a world-shaking event at the time, something that impacted the global financial markets. But today, not many people know about it, probably because I wasn't even born yet back then. March 25th, 1975. The king was shot dead at a palace banquet by his schizophrenic nephew. Just like that, so carelessly, his life ended so lightly, just like a wisp of hair. King Faisal of Saudi Arabia, he was supposed to be a great king, damn, but he was just shot dead with a single bullet. Everyone was shocked and paused for a moment. How could it be him? Damn, he was a psychosis. How did he even get in with a gun? But there was nothing anyone could do, and that was the end of it. So, Bunker didn't know the new king either, and shit, the new king wasn't interested anymore, so Bunker was out of options. He went east again, saying they should look for Chairman Mao, but at that time, Chairman Mao was fucking too poor, and besides, he was close to dying. It was 1975. Chairman Mao was either already dead or about to die, so China was fucking poor. If they didn't go to China, who did they turn to? The Philippines. The great dictator of the Philippines was named Marcos. Not Musk, but Marcos, as in the same name as Marx. You know, Marx and Engels. Marcos had the same name, Marcos. Older people all know this. He also had a very beautiful wife. What was her name? Imelda Marcos. When I was a kid, on China's news broadcast, they always talked about Marcos. He was the dictator of the Philippines. He became the president in a coup. He was short on money. So what happened? The banker said, "No problem. You don't need to have money. You just sugar. The Philippines has sugarcane plantations, right? You give them to me and I'll give you 20 million ounces of silver." And then Didn't I just give you silver? You take the silver to Saudi Arabia and you can directly exchange it for the oil and goods you urgently need. Meanwhile, I take your sugar refinery, and your sugarcane, and I can sell them for big money on the New York Mercantile Exchange. That way, everyone's happy. What is his real goal? His real goal is that he needs money. He knows Marcos doesn't have cash, but Marcos has sugar, and sugar is as good as money. He wants to use 20 million taels of silver to exchange for sugar. If this move works, his liquidity will come rushing back because he can make silver the global currency for international commodity trading. Previously, the main currency for commodity trading was the US dollar. Before 1975, it was the dollar. If he does this, doesn't it mean that silver can also be used as currency? And what would that allow him to do? Think about it. Who controls the US dollar? New York, of course. As soon as the International Monetary Fund saw this news, they immediately contacted Marcos. The International Monetary Fund issued an ultimatum. Philippines, if you go through with this, don't come to the IMF for aid or loans in the future. As a poor country, the Philippines had borrowed a lot from the IMF, so Marcos didn't want to risk everything for just a single city or a small gain. He didn't want to offend a whole river just for a ladle of water, so President Marcos broke the agreement. At this point, the Hunt brothers' capital chain was about to break. It was just like today. Then the price of silver, which had just risen to $6 or $7, dropped to $4. Isn't that the same ratio as today? $6 down to $4, from $1.50 up to $6, then $6 down to $4. You guys really haven't seen much of the world, have you? But in this recent round, the price of silver hasn't quadrupled, right? It went from $1.50 to $6. That's a fourfold increase. Then dropped to $3, which is a drop by half. So it's about the same, pretty close. And then is that the end of the story? A lot of people say the story is over, but it's not over yet. He wants revenge. He's going to squeeze the shorts even harder. Hunt is going to squeeze the shorts. Just watch. That's right. Spring has come. As the season of spring passed and April arrived, Hunt finally traveled back to his quiet hometown in the state of Texas. He looked at Austin, at Dallas. He took a look. Hey, across the vast farmlands of America, why hasn't anyone planted soybeans this year? Soybeans are just what we call beans for soybean oil. The US usually plants a lot of them. It's a major commodity, but this year nothing's been planted. If nothing was planted, then there will be no harvest in the fall. With no harvest, COMEX dares to keep trading soybeans there. Haha. I want revenge. You idiots. Fuck. Messed with me, you old money crowd, the establishment, the shadow government, the deep state. Soybeans all in, buying soybeans. He secretly calculated after planting soybeans in the spring that there would definitely be a reduced soybean yield in the fall. Production kept increasing through the summer, but in the fall, he suddenly revealed his hand and went all in on soybeans. With a big move, he bought in bulk. A single American investor can only buy up to 3 million bushels of soybeans. This is a trading unit. 3 million bushels is the limit. The two brothers, along with their relatives, bought a total of 22 million bushels, all in, ready for delivery. That year, even the whole United States couldn't come up with 22 million bushels of soybeans, so the price of soybeans skyrocketed. Damn, they made a killing. At this point, COMEX started playing dirty, just like what's happening today with silver. After I explain this to you, you'll understand that today's market is COMEX playing dirty. COMEX is drawing the line today, but why didn't Hunt dare to draw the line back then? Why didn't Hunt dare to do it? Because Hunt was also an American. He wasn't that weak, so what did he do? He turned to the law. At this point, even the crooks had to talk about the law. COMEX took the Hunt brothers to court. On what grounds did they sue them? Because each of them was only allowed to buy 6 million ounces, but they used a lot of proxies to buy 22 million ounces. That's what's called illegal means, right? That's like borrowing someone else's ID. Of course, the Hunts wouldn't accept that. They said if this was the first time I'd done something like this, I'd admit it. Which of the wealthy old money families across the entire east coast of the United States, like the Rockefellers, the Morgans, or the Rothschilds, haven't done the exact same thing? Why single me out and sue me? But it didn't really matter. This time, they just happened to catch you red-handed. So the complex lawsuit dragged on, and by the time the autumn season had passed and the final settlement was done, the official verdict came down. The Hunt family won. After all, everyone else was doing the exact same thing, so in the end, they just let it go, let it go. Wasn't this just them playing dirty? So what happened next? The Hunts did the math. Since things turned out this way, the price went back to where it was. But even so, the Hunt brothers still made $40 million. They didn't lose anything. Of course, the billions of dollars in unrealized gains were all gone. They made $40 million. But from then on, a bitter feud was born. In 1978, things took a turn. Saudi Arabia's political situation stabilized. A new king took the throne, and two sheikhs arrived, since it's called a sheikhdom, right? Two sheikhs came, gave them money, because the Saudis believed silver prices would rise, so they decided to work together. They set up a company in the Bermuda Islands, BVI, called International Metals Investment Company. The Hunt brothers held half the shares, and the two Saudi sheikhs held the other half. 4 shareholders in total. They accumulated a lot of real gold and silver. Can you imagine? In 1978, it started again. Before 1975, the price was $1.15, then it rose to $6. Then it dropped back down to $3. In 1978, with Saudi money involved, so what if it's $3? With one move, they pushed it up to $16. If you don't believe it, you can look it up yourself. See if the price really went from $4 or $3 up to 16, another fourfold increase. But the Hunts weren't done yet. It went up another 4 times. On the New York Exchange, they held 43 million ounces of silver. As I just mentioned, he had already bought 5,500 ounces, and then he bought another 44 million ounces. The price of silver in just a few months shot up past $16 just like today. All the American financial groups went crazy and started buying in too. If it were up to me, I'd do the same. Just like now, aiming to wipe out all the East Coast COMEX shareholders. The old money group started delivering, buying up more and using their monopoly on silver to upgrade their wealth. Damn, you can see this is a disaster. As a market maker, COMEX had no silver to deliver. This situation happened again. By the very end of 1979, the 2 major commodity exchanges, one located in Chicago and the other in New York City, combined had only 12 million ounces of silver bars remaining in their vaults. That is right. There were only 12 million ounces left in total. The Hunt brothers had bought contracts for 43 million ounces, and with others following their lead and buying in, there were even more buy orders. How could they possibly deliver?